Welcome, y'all. Hopefully you're hearing this music with us. Can you give us a thumbs up or something if you hear it? Otherwise, we're just here dancing with ourselves, and that's okay too. These are friends, Shell, in the Bay Area, from their album. Well, they were as a band called Earth Amplified. And I think that was the name of this album. So good. Eco-social justice, background music. Can you all hear it? Can someone let me know?
Can they hear us?
Can you hear us?
We can hear it all.
All right.
Sounds.
Right. As people come in, would you be willing to chat in your name, where you're coming from? If you're willing to share some of your peoples and also the peoples of the lands you're on. I'll start it too.
We'll get up in the grind, time the bills, I ain't got no time, gotta keep on rolling, gotta keep on rolling. Yeah, you need to find no vibe, my whole thing's alive, gotta keep on rolling, gotta keep on rolling. Up in the grind, time the bills, I ain't got no time, gotta keep on rolling, gotta keep on rolling. Yeah, you need so fine, flow by my whole world comes alive, gotta keep on rolling, gotta keep on rolling.
Okay, we're gonna start here in a sec. It's early here in Colorado, even earlier if you're on the West Coast, especially for a Sunday.
So what's the movement?
All right. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Welcome, everyone. I think we hear somebody. Somebody got their mic on. Emerson, maybe? Just say hi, Emerson.
Hi, y'all. Sorry about that.
Yeah, all good. All good. All right, y'all. So welcome to 5 to 500, a people's plan for the planet Earth. This is part of the Electric Black Earth Festival, April 2024, Naropa University, Afrofuturist Astrology Festival. And we, yes, and yeah, commemorating, initiating the Uranus and Jupiter conjunction. Only happens every 14 years. And so we want to kind of share, we want to share a vision of possibility in regards to climate justice, in regards to just transition. And we want to try to take some efforts that we're working on locally and that many communities around the country and around the world are working on. And we want to try to put it in a long view and a long vision context. So there's quite a bit of content we want to cover today. And our suggestion is that you don't have to try to understand everything. You don't have to try to know everything. Okay. Work with your subconscious as well as your conscious. Work in a relaxed way, or listen and take in a relaxed way. We'll try to have some interactive pieces. We're going to actually have you all go into breakout groups at a certain point, which we'll go over all of that soon here. But just to know that there's many stops that we're going to make, and in some cases, we're just going to presence things instead of going deeply into them. So we'll start by, and if you're willing to come on camera, that's awesome. We'll start by taking a bow, which we often do at Europa. It just helps everyone get centered. And then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to take us. Okay, so if you want to just find your feet, just conscious in your connection with the ground. Or if you're sitting on your bed, noticing your support, noticing your breathing. Noticing the uprightness of your posture. And there's, in 3D space, there's another group starting right now. So we're going to imagine all of us are breathing and heart beating together. And we'll take our breath.
Thank you. As we get started and we figure out this tech together, please also chat in who you are, who your peoples are, and the lands. Who are the people of the lands you're on? Oh, I don't use this app. Present. Okay. You're here for 5 to 500, a people's plan. We're going to speak a lot about why 500, but essentially, what is the world we're co-creating in 500 years together right now? And how do we do that with a little bit more consciousness? How do we do that more intentionally? How do we do that as some type of ancestors? And knowing that we're going to be some type of ancestors, knowing that people in the future are going to look back on this time and say, what was going on? What did you do? And hopefully they're going to say, how did you sow these seeds? How did you plant these things? How did you know it was time? I feel like I don't want to keep this slide up very long. It's too much us, and we're already on your screen. If I go back to the other one. So, but this is our company. Our business is Once and Future Green, is an ethno-futurist business. And I wonder if anyone has heard, like, does anyone have an idea of what this is a reference to? What is Once and Future Green referring to? You can chat it in or unmute even. It's cool. We actually, I haven't run into many people that do it yet. Oh, we got 2 in the chat. We help manage the chat and the other screen. IDK. Okay, thank you. So Once and Future Green is basically a signal that this is an ethno-futurist endeavor, and that we know that the world that we're trying to create resembles a world that was once. It once was. We are not just inventing something. We are not just futures oriented. We're rooted in something that was. And even though we're both ethno-futurists, it also speaks to the Once and Future King, which is a European myth that was revolutionary because it had King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and it was revolutionary to say, oh, we're gonna have a round table, a table where if you were to walk up on this table, you don't know who's in charge. Everybody's at the table. We are facing each other. We're making decisions together. Everybody gets to speak. It is the way many people do things from around the world, but it was a revolutionary thing at that time in Europe. And the idea was that there was this once and future king, and that this king had been lost and was coming back as going to usher in a time of democracy and of the people having a say. And so that's where we got once and future green. So that's our business's name, and that's why, and it's ethno-futurist endeavor. And we're not really looking for kings, we're looking for greens. And we're looking for different visions of what paradise and kingdoms and queendoms, themdoms could look like. So what we're doing here, y'all,
We are calling for a 500-year plan for the planet Earth.
with you all.
With you all.
And all of your people, all of your communities. This culture is very futuristically oriented, actually. I easily found this online. Just the side of like future, no past, okay? And I work in sustainability so much and environmental justice. And thank you, Duffy, for sharing in some of your peoples. I know it's early in the morning, so everybody's like, oh, I'll get on camera later. You're good as you are. But yeah, so this culture is very future oriented. And even if you hear like in the climate movement, so often when people are like, why do you engage in this work? The answer is almost always because of our children, because of the children's children. And that is a fine thing. But to me, it's very incomplete, and it is a pattern that I've noticed that if you ask a lot of communities of color why we engage in this work, is actually because we have a sense of responsibility, because we've actually inherited something, because the past has gifted us something that we are responsible for, and that we want to be in the continuation of passing on something beautiful. So there's the image of the Sankofa bird and the Sankofa bird. So that is, you know, Afrofuturist, and this is originally an Akan symbol from Africa that says, go back and fetch it, and essentially says you must go back in order to move forward. So it's a different view of how we move through time and what is important, and to say, yes, we're moving towards the future, but we're rooted in something. And that is going to be part of what we cover today, is seeing how seeing what visions people have had in the past that made the earth beautiful, delicious, democratic, all of the things that we're hoping to see come to fruition as well. And we're honoring, especially today, this idea of the Sankofa bird, and that we do have to go back in order to go to the future. And part of that is understanding how we are where we are right now. And trying to just move forward without understanding that seems dangerous. So this is not AI futures. This is rooted cultural earth futures. A word on language. I just want to make sure that we give each other some grace today, because we are talking about things that is really difficult to talk about, and that the words don't quite match up. And so we know we're envisioning something in 500 years, knowing that the language we're using might seem completely offensive in the future, or, you know, or it might just be really inaccurate, but we're going to go with the ideas even as we co-create the language and work with each other to like wordsmith it, but we're not going to like diminish ideas because the words aren't quite right yet. This is an act of the imagination. And really, I think even understanding the present is an act of the imagination, which we'll talk about in a second as well. So this is partly about language. It's partly about group agreements. We're going to be in breakout rooms. We're going to be engaging with each other in the chat and here in the main room. So just having respect for one another and trying to work with one another knowing that we're dealing with this realm that we're translating all the time.
Okay, so just to give y'all a little bit of overview of where we want to go here in the next hour and a half. We want to look at our concepts of time, our usual concepts of time in our society, and we want to look to some expanded concepts of time. We want to look at some of our cultural legacies and cultural technologies and different ways of approaching a just transition and climate justice. We're going to get into some fundamental principles, guidelines, or principles that we think are helpful when thinking about a just transition and thinking about community level planning and scaling community level planning. We want to have a kind of 500-year meditation with y'all. And actually, if for that section, it might be helpful for you to have a pen and paper or to take notes on your computers, okay? So we'll have like a 500-year meditation. We're gonna walk backward from the future. And then we'll put y'all in the breakout rooms, we'll have y'all share some of the things that happen in breakout rooms. And we'll also try to like collate a lot of what we hear visually. We're going to kind of give some examples of communities that are doing their own climate justice planning or their own just transition planning, like community level work. We're going to talk about some methods through which that could be done, and then considerations like potential issues, problems, things we want to think about, and like questions that we're still living with. Then, uh-oh, we got the dub effect going. And then finally, we want to get into how we can take action as we close. So, all right, let's get started, y'all. So firstly, with time, we know that our society is very short range in its planning. We oftentimes are working on, the 4-year election cycle, and the people who are, in positions of power are often making choices just so they can be reelected. We know that corporations are often looking, quarterly or maybe annually, in terms of their actions and their planning and their decision making, and that we're dealing with the built environment, right? We're dealing with the natural environment, and we're dealing with growing and raising people. And these aren't things that happen in 3 or 4 years. These aren't things that happen on, financial quarters. These are things that take generations, right? So how do we move from orienting our time and our thinking around like very short-term gains and very short time frames to longer time frames? Okay. Okay, so this is festival. One of our central principles is around Afrofuturism. Y'all heard of Afrofuturism? Make some kind of signal. This is participatory, y'all. This is Afrofuturism. This isn't just any straight lecture. This is call and response. So at certain points, we can call on you, and a response lets us know in a way that we exist. Yeah, we're not just talking out into the void. Okay. Yes. All right. See some claps. See people coming visual. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Afrofuturism is, in its most basic, is Black science fiction. It's science fiction written from an African American or African diasporic or African continental perspective. And really, what's happened in the last many years is that a lot of Afrofuturists have gone beyond just literature. They've gone into fashion, they've gone into music, and they've started to move into community organizing and utilizing the science fiction imagination, right? Utilizing the Black imagination as a way to do community level planning. And one of the things too that the Afrofuturist movement is really looking towards is that we're all futurists and we're all reclaiming this power to envision, imagine, and collectively create futures that we are all in, that, you know, Black people are in, Indigenous people are in, brown people are in, queer people are in, women are in, right? Because so much science fiction imagination has been sculpted by people, by white men, and is, you know, therefore limited to a certain extent. So Afrofuturism there. Just want to shout out Rashida Phillips and Moore Mother, two Afrofuturists, are part of the Black Quantum Futurist Collective in Philadelphia, and they've really pioneeered this work, or maybe I should
In
say
a good way.
pioneered.
Speaking of
Yeah,
words,
right. Pioneered this utilizing Afrofuturism on a community level basis and working with communities that are being heavily gentrified and trying to help those communities basically see themselves in the future and not have other people kind of design futures on top of them. They're also working with this concept of retrocausality, which comes from the real, you know, realm of quantum mechanics, which basically kind of looks at the way in which on the quantum level, certain activities in the future will actually backcast themselves into the present and have, you know, minute but measurable impacts on the present. And they're taking that, combining with traditional African time concepts, particularly from Kenya. And so this idea that the futures that we start to see actually are reaching back for us as well, and doing that on a community level. No, we're here. Sorry for me to get your okay, transparent co-facilitation.
Ethnofuturism. Ramon got this image, I think part because of Marshall McLuhan, who says we move forward through the rearview mirror. It's another way of saying the more things change, the more they stay the same. That there's, and even your last slide was sort of like science catching up with what people and cultures have already been naming and knowing, that the current, the past, the future have a special relationship and it's not linear. And it's like sometimes hard to imagine how brilliant our so many cultures have been. Like, it's not just amazing futures we are trying to cultivate. It's also like, whoa. So I love this image. Ramon also is the one who picked this out, of Inuit sunglasses, the first sunglasses. Protective, cool, amazing, culturally rooted, geographically rooted, may not be applicable everywhere, right? And that is part of the futures that we're trying to create. And that's actually part of what the Zapatistas talk about, is how do we have room in our house for many realities, for multiple universes. And so we are not trying to create one great big global future. We're not trying to create one plan for 500 years and this is what it's all going to look like. There's a really strong recognition that's going to be different in different places. It might even look different in Denver than it does in Boulder, right? It could be two communities right next to each other, and that beautiful paradise future looks slightly different. Like what paradise looks like to the Inuit is different than what paradise looks like to me. Hallelujah, amazing. That's one of the gifts of this diverse, rotating, spherical metabolism that some people call earth, but should probably be called water. Another thing I want to speak to with ethnofuturism that is a really important piece to me is that it is hard to really imagine not just the past, not just the future, but it's hard to imagine what's actually happening in the world all at once exactly right now. On the most basic level of like, how many births are happening right now? How many deaths are happening right now? What does the war look like in different places? What does the war look like here? What does the war look like in Gaza? What does the war look like in Congo? Who is praying right now? Who is making food? Who is making innovations? Who is dreaming? Who is elated? Who is getting married and who is falling apart? Sometimes just to imagine like how many cars are on the road right now in the world. Even if we know that number, it's an act of the imagination to be able to hold that in our minds. So it's all a radical act. It's all a radical act of the imagination. There's no other way through. So ethnofuturism, it really grounds us and acknowledges the ways in which our imagination is necessary to understand what's happening now. I mean, just to understand your own lineage, like how many generations back can you actually imagine? 4, 5, 7, 100? How many people are we talking about 100 generations back? You got a whole crowd of people behind you, even just understanding yourself. You know, we have like 1 trillion cells of bacteria in our bodies. Like, do we even know what's going on in our bodies? No. So we're playing with it, we're moving with it, and we are helping those mysteries translate across time.
Yeah, and one of the things that Michelle has really taught me over the years is that the kind of bank of cultural imaginations that we have and cultural histories that we have is the storehouse of cultural futures that we have.
Yes.
And that if we lose languages and we lose cultural stories, mythologies, ways of living, we're actually losing access to different timelines. And so one of the timelines or cultural imaginations that we've been blessed with in the sort of larger, what do we call ourselves? Are we post-colonial, colonial, industrialized, whatever it is that we are? We've been blessed with this imagination from the Haudenosaunee people, and of the 7-generation principle. You know, this idea that when large decisions are made, decisions that are going to affect the collective are made, they are made with a hindsight vision of 7 generations backward, right? They're made with an understanding that the place that we are in now is directly connected to people 7 generations ago, and that we are still working with fulfilling the deeds of people 7 generations ago. And that what we do now is going to directly impact people 7 generations into the future. And that we can't just think about ourselves and our own families and our own quick good. We really have to think that, like, you know, when we build a building's going to last anywhere between 40 and 150 years, right? So how are we constructing our homes, our streets, you know, setting trees? We're not just going to set a tree up and then cut it down 4 or 5 years. You see this all the time. You know, how do we think long range, long term, and really recognize that our choices now will have impacts far into the future, and that we are also helping to complete purposes or heal wounds that were initiated in the past? I'm not sure. Advance the slides.
So that is like a beautiful way of deepening into time. And the place that we find ourselves in now, there's also some ways of understanding time that come to us, not quite through beauty, but through crisis. And this image speaks to nuclear guardianship and the ways in which when people began to develop nuclear power and nuclear weaponry that could destroy so much and is so toxic for so long, it started to change our idea of time and the ways in which we have to work in time, even for scientists. So I'm now talking about like Western science is like, okay, the half-life of plutonium is 25,000 years. So in 25,000 years, it's still going to be toxic and deadly. It'll just be half as toxic and deadly, which is toxic and deadly. So we're talking about like 100,000 years until this stuff is toxic levels that we understand. So if that is the case, and I wish I had put an image here of it, but scientists even started to say, wait, how do we warn people 25,000 years in the future not to mess with our nuclear waste? What was happening 25,000 years in the past? Oh my God, there was not even a United States. Okay, there was not even English. English was not a language yet at that time. So how are we thinking through that was what was going on 25,000 years ago and how different it is from today? How do we warn people 25,000 years into the future not to mess with our nuclear waste? But we don't know what language they're going to speak. We don't know what kind of nations they're going to be. We don't know what kind of organizations and ways of being people are going to have. So this is something that even Western science is dealing with, and they actually called together a gathering of people from around the world to try to come up with symbols, right? Even acknowledging the nuclear symbol is not going to mean anything possibly in 25,000 years. So what would be some like pictographs, basically? Scientists worked on pictographs that would tell people, get away from here. So
Yeah, so yeah, this festival, part of the reason why we timed this festival the way that we did is we've timed it on the conjunction, the planetary conjunction, which basically means the closest point in the orbit of two planets, the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. And that conjunction only happens every 14 years approximately, okay? And part of the reason that we plan this festival at this time is that we're trying to work and synchronize ourselves on a larger cycle than the cycle of the solar year, which is what we're accustomed to using. And I would say we're generally unconscious of even that cycle. And we're trying to yoke ourselves to a greater sense of time and larger cosmic cycles. And you know, this is it might seem kind of strange to some folks, but you know, peoples from around the world for centuries have not only looked at the solar cycle and the lunar cycle, but also, like in the case of the Mayans, have worked with the cycles of Venus as, you know, as a way to plot their calendars and as a way to basically like segment time, right? Like the Mayan calendar works on, you know, multiple levels of cycle, but one cycle they work on is like a 52-year cycle, right? So just to start thinking about like, how do we use planetary orbits as one possible method to have a calendar that isn't just um, a year long, but to have calendars that actually have a more expansive range of time. And also part of the reason to think about planetary cycles is they're not arbitrary cycles. These are real happenings in nature, and they're predictable, right? Go to the next slide.
yeah, and actually a little glitch in the time is that and Jamil is on the call. I'm so sorry, y'all, but I guess the wrong link got sent out for this event and people are having a hard time joining. I was able to help one friend get in, but Jamil, if there's a way that you're here and you can hear us, if you can help forward the right link, it sounds like people are having a hard time getting in. And thanks, Ryan, for the heads up in India.
Okay. All right. Well, sadly, we're going to keep moving. People will join in. This will be recorded, and we will send the recording to folks. Thanks for your patience. We are working out this platform of having the festival both on the ground and projected online. So one example of a planetary cycle that has a really long range and has a really predictable range is the planetary conjunctions between Pluto and Neptune. And Pluto and Neptune come the closest in their orbit. It's this little place here. That's the conjunction. They come the closest in their orbit every approximately 500 years, right? So I think the last conjunction of Neptune and Pluto was in the late 19th century, I think the 1893, 92. And you know, so from there we're what, probably just 100 years or so through that cycle. So, and astrologically, if you all resonate with astrology, you know, potentially some of our audience members don't, but if you resonate with astrology, astrologically, Pluto and Neptune, because they have such a slow cycle and because they stay in a particular zodiac sign for, you know, decades in some cases, they're said to condition or symbolize the condition of entire generations, right? So, you know, Michelle and I we have our Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the same sign. And everybody who was born in the late 80s or late 70s and early 80s is going to share those planets. Whereas people who were born in the millennial generation are going to share like, for example, there was a conjunction of Uranus and Neptune in 1993, 94, and everyone who's born in the millennial generation is also going to share that. So these long orbits in astrology are said to symbolize and condition the energy signature, if you will, or maybe even the evolutionary and social purpose of an entire generation, okay? And so when those conjunctions between Neptune and Pluto happen, it basically signifies that like there's a there's a tectonic shift in like the dream structure of the earth as a whole, right? And the collective unconscious of the earth as a whole, and how that manifests in terms of like how we imagine and act into being like different forms of power. That's at least one way to say it. So that's a 500-year cycle. What was a plottable cycle? What if we had a calendar and developed societies and plans on a 500-year cycle like this Neptune-Pluto cycle, as an example? You can go to the next slide. Okay, this is kind of a big jump, but a concrete example of a 500-year plan. This is the Sarovodaya movement in Sri Lanka, and this movement arose out of an attempt to heal the civil war in Sri Lanka, which had been kind of, as many civil wars around the world had been sort of set up by European colonialism, where they kind of raised one people up over the other, or they brought a lot of people who were not in as large a numbers in Sri Lanka into Sri Lanka, and it just kind of, and then kind of set up a little, you know, exploiter system. And so the Sri Lankan Civil War, you know, burst out as a result of that. And so the Sarovodaya movement arose to kind of bring some connection and unity and peace between the Tamil and the Sinhalese people in Sri Lanka. And their vision is of a world with no poverty and a non-violent world, okay? And they have the audacity to say, we want a no poverty world and a non-violent world, okay? And they're also like, that's not going to happen in 5 years. That's not going to happen in 10 years. That's something that's going to take, they're plotting on and they're saying in 500 years, we will have healed the war between the peoples of Sri Lanka, okay? Now, that's a Sri Lankan Civil War. In the United States, we talk about the American Civil War as if it's completely gone. And yet, when we had the attempt to disrupt the passage of power of the last presidency, the people who attempted to disrupt it, what did they do? What was one of the first symbols we saw? We saw the Confederate flag. So clearly there are people in our country that are still burning about that situation, right? And I think if we really look closely at our national politics, we can see that, I mean, it might jump back out at us, right? So how do we think about, you know, when we're talking about the Civil War in the United States, or even the so-called Indian Wars, right? We think about these things as over and done, but these are still wounds that we are trying to recover from. These are still justices that we're trying to make right, okay? So Sarovodaya thought about their work on a 500-year plan, okay? I want to throw this just quickly again to Palestine, Israel. Like, people are surprised at this latest episode of spectacular violence in Palestine and Israel, okay? But this isn't a one-time thing. This is something that's been going on for a long time. And if we're really going to address, I don't know who we are, but if that problem is really going to be addressed, it's probably going to need a very long time scale. I just want to give some, the Sarovodaya movement is worth studying. I think it's a really comprehensive model that all of us who are doing community level planning, who are doing peace work, really should study. And the movement has many principles, and I'm just going to touch on a few here. they're starting off, they're rooted in spiritual empowerment. This is a movement that meditates together, okay? And on the last slide, it said something like this movement embraces like 4,000 villages, right? They have trained thousands of teachers, thousands of preschool teachers. They've trained thousands of farmers, okay? And all the organizations, they are rooting in meditation, okay? Because they know that we've got to be centered as individuals. We've got to be centered as groups. You know, we need to develop tremendous internal strength, internal resources, whether you see those as being inherently human or spiritual, but we need to develop internal resources in order to really make this movement, and in order to confront the violence in their society. So spiritual empowerment, social empowerment, you know, they're looking at community capacity building. They do a lot of work on early childhood education. Again, investing in the future by investing in children. They do a lot of work with women's empowerment and trying to like cut through the caste system and cut through patriarchy, their local and probably also colonially imposed patriarchy. They do a lot to try to cut through that. And they also do a lot to try to care for the most vulnerable members of their population, orphans. You know, you got a civil war, there's a lot of orphans. You know, unhoused folks, elderly folks, people who've been suffered abuse, who've been disabled. They're doing a lot with economic empowerment. One of the foundations of their movement is that each village needs its own economic engine. Each village is a generator of economy, of cash, of crops, of cloth, okay? Each village having its own economic engine, each village getting involved in banking, each village reviving traditional arts and working with industrial production, okay? Technological empowerment that follows, you know, looking at water supplies and sanitation, looking at alternative energy, low-cost housing, and building, in their particular situation, rural infrastructure, like the creation of roads, super important. Political empowerment, each village is self-governing to an extent. They are helping each village that is part of this movement have its own internal governance structure. So it's not completely reliant on some centralized authority, even theirs. And then also a lot of community dialogue about what constitutes good governance, okay? Getting people involved in policy making. And then finally, legal empowerment. They do a lot of work around advocacy and around building conflict resolution and legal literacy in all of their communities. Okay.
How does that sound, y'all?
Call and response, respond, do something, show us something.
Is this hidden? Is this it?
All right, Ryan.
This is the inspiration for the 500 year and also just speaks to the power of somebody standing up, having a vision, and then it actually reverberates. So that's where we got the 500 from. Otherwise, I probably would have done 100. So I might blast through some of this because of time. If you can give me call and response, head nods in the chat, and I'll know where to go faster, where to go slower. But I want to go over some of the legacies that we have for beautiful, just, sustainable communities. And that before we go into our envisioning, kind of what we were saying before, like the languages we have, the cultures we have access to actually shape our imagination. And that's part of how they shape the future. So I want to open us up and see how we can root a little bit in solutions and even some of the problems from around the world. And I'm actually going to start, honestly, with some of the issues. How did we get here? Where are we? And how did we get here? Does anybody recognize this? Give it in the chat. This is a screenshot I took, but now it was a few years ago. All right, thanks y'all for the chat. It's very helpful. It lets us know, are we on the right track? We're talking fast, we're talking too slow. Yeah, we're co-creating this even though it's online. So I took this screenshot from Google Maps. I just went to Google Maps and was like, is it true that you can see the ways in which colonialism impacted Haiti from space. Yes, it is true. So this slide is the artificial boundary of the one island that is called the two nations of Haiti and Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic still has its greenery. Haiti has been being punished for a very hundreds of years at this point for rebelling against colonialism. They still pay France reparations for having left. And part of how those reparations are paid are with natural resources. So you can go to Google Maps, try this on your own. You got to zoom all the way in and you can see this difference between one side of the island being green and one side of the island being deforested. And really, it is just a small taste and sample of what happens around the world. And the fact that you can see colonialism from space. You can see colonialism in the land, not just in the people who is here, who are not here, not just in the buildings, not just in what is left standing. You can see it in, I mean, in the United States, we are at least 85% deforested from when Europeans first started coming here. Okay, so there are so many real impacts to this. And this is just a bird's eye view and naming how vast it is. And again, this is a political boundary. We keep breathing. I'm sure many of you have seen this image. In wanting to genocide the people of this place, colonizers also on accident and very much on purpose destroy the ecosystems here. And we will get to this, I think, in a little bit, but essentially these lands were a giant edible forest garden from the east coast of what's now the United States to the west coast of the United States. This place was tended, it was beautiful, it was fertile, it was regenerative, it was feeding people, it had cities. And part of the attack on the people. And it's not, I think, you know, when we think about this, often we think about it as like a food injustice and that colonizers were killing the buffalo in order to kill the food supply of Native Americans. But there's also a spiritual attack that was happening here. There's also a soul injury that happened here, especially for people that saw themselves connected. Not just saw themselves connected, but people that were still in the living memory of the ways in which we are all connected. So there's so much to rebuild. How we got here, I work sometimes on issues around the Colorado River. This stuff was designed. Giselle kind of spoke to this in one of her poems last night. You know, these things were designed by men and they can be taken down. These are the guys who signed the Colorado River Compact in 1824, 23, in the 1820s. It was 100 years ago. It is white dudes who did this. This is just one instance. It was just the Colorado River Compact, but these types of spaces were what created our cities, our lands, our policies, our governments, and continued forward until people were creating highways and transportation systems and zoning. And it often looks very similar to these rooms. And these guys, even in their maps, just cut off Mexico. So even though the river goes from Colorado through so much of the United States, carved out the Grand Canyon, goes to Mexico, their maps just cut off at Mexico. They didn't have Native people at these tables, and they over allocated the river. They didn't know the river, they didn't know how things worked. And it was a wet year when they did this. And they were like, wow, look how much water is. This is how we'll divvy it up. Well, they divvied up water in a wet year. And since then, we've had many dry years. So the river no longer flows to the ocean. The Colorado River dries up before it gets there. It's a catastrophe. in that process, those guys, you know, in that designing, didn't think there was like any other experts to turn to. And so part of our work as ethnofuturists is to remind us that our traditions from around the world have so much wisdom, so much beautiful, so many beautiful practices that could help us regenerate, help grow our connections and actual tangible ecological benefits in the world, as well as peace and legal systems and governing structures like Ramon mentioned. And so one piece that I just want to name that a lot of times it is made to seem as though like all of the inventions and all of the knowledge and all of the libraries come from Europe. And this is a good moment to remember, well, actually, a lot of these things come from other parts of the world, and everyone has their own wisdom traditions. So one way in which this happens that I get really interested, I was going to say obsessed, I don't think it's quite obsessed, but really interested in is domestication. What is this process that humans have been able to take things that grow wild and form a long-lasting relationship with them, that make these things that were wild and were possibly toxic or disgusting or tiny or too difficult to manage, beautiful, big, delicious, nourishing? Like, how does that happen? It's amazing. So, you know, I'm Colombian, and so have looked a lot at the domestication practices of Latin America, but a lot of those are also tied to the domestication practices in Africa. And I want to say here that this entire continent was filled with innovators that figured out how to grow food for people without depleting the soil. And in fact, that was part of the enslavement trade, was that they weren't just looking for people, they were looking for farmers. They brought over whole swaths of farmers from Africa to come and work the land here. It's sort of like the myth that's perpetuated now of like, what's it called? Unskilled labor, that they call it. In the US, 75% of our agriculture is still done by people who are foreign born. It's not unskilled labor. It's highly skilled labor. It's highly skilled. They know when you pick, when you pot. You know, this whole festival is in partnership with Frontline Farming, who Ramon and I both worked with, and you know, asked them. They've had volunteer days where they're like, "Hey, please weed this field," and they come back and people pulled out all the beets because they didn't know the difference between the weeds and the actual crops. It does take skill. It takes a type of sensing. It takes a way of knowing to do these things. So in the US, and again, a lot of my work is around environmental justice. So we hear about regenerative agriculture. It's this amazing new idea that we can grow stuff without harming the soil, without depleting the soil, that we can actually improve the soil while we grow food. And I just Googled regenerative agriculture and started taking screenshots of the first people that show up. So this was the first person in the image that came up with that. And I just want to say, is that really where regenerative agriculture comes from? Again, oopsie. Again, people were domesticating food all over Africa and not depleting all of the soil. That was happening in Latin America, in Asia, basically everywhere. People have figured out how to live in some semblance or not in tune with the land, so that we can keep feeding ourselves without destroying. Also, the father of regenerative agriculture. Does anybody know who this is? Let's see in the chat. Who knows this guy? Nobody knows this guy. I hope you will take a minute. Can you pull up a slide on our thingy? I hope you'll take a minute after this to learn more about George Washington Carver. Such a beautiful soul. He is really famous for, anybody know?
Come on, Emerson, come on.
Peanut butter.
Ah,
And Lux got it. Peanuts, peanuts,
all
peanuts.
right, Lux.
Okay, he is famous for peanuts. He actually didn't invent peanut butter, but he did invent like 200 ways to use peanuts. But do we know why? Why peanuts?
Because that's what he could grow.
That's what he could grow, but it goes
They
deeper than
fix
that.
nitrogen.
It fixes nitrogen. So he was basically coming out of a period of enslavement where Black people were supposed to be getting land from the United States. People were still sharecropping and coming out of sharecropping, and they were inheriting these soils that were abused. And, you know, again, there's no way you can abuse people the way that you were abusing them and not be abusing the land. You can't be abusing the land in that way and not be abusing people. It was together. And so the land had been growing a lot of cotton and tobacco that it was not supposed to and was not meant to grow. And it was absolutely depleted. So even the people that were getting the land that they were promised were getting this land that was like, I can't do another thing. And so he was saying, wait, we can grow peanuts, which fix nitrogen. So they actually improve the soil while giving us a yield. He's like, we need to grow things that will regenerate the soil. I'm not sure he was using that language, but will help heal the soil, give us a yield, and create economic opportunities for us. So that's why peanuts, because he was saying peanuts will fix the soil. So as we improve back the soil, we can eat and we can create economic opportunity through all of these different products we can make out of the peanuts. It is sustainability everywhere, in every direction. So beautiful. And if you could pull up that slide, I also wanted to give you guys a quote of his that was really beautiful. Can you go to the notes in the slides? No. Sorry. Yeah, please take some time to learn more about him, but also know that whenever you hear about regenerative agriculture, we should be talking about him. Here's one of his quotes. I love to think of nature as an unlimited broadcasting station through which God speaks to us every hour if we will only tune in. Again, as we think about who's connected to nature and what does connection to nature look like? Often we don't think of Black people in this country. We don't think of people of color. And this is such a good example that this is part of our legacies. Another westernized version of this, and one of my mentors, Eric Tonesmeyer, is really
Can't talk until
oh,
11 my time.
accidentally unmuted. I thought you were joining in. So edible forest gardening. So, you know, the ways in which Europeans grew food and when they came here and imported this system of monocrops, one crop for acres and acres in straight rows. Okay, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. It still doesn't to me. And now in the permaculture movement, you have a lot of talk about edible forest gardens and realizing that you can grow things together and that their growth supports one another, kind of like what peanuts do. Okay, peanuts growth supports the soil. So if you were, yeah, so it's a guild, it's a polyculture, you grow these things together. Even this image, it's like everything is so separated out, but for people of the Americas and throughout Africa, it wasn't so separated out. You grow things together, they support one another, and you get multiple yields at the same time, multiple different types of food and whatnot. In fact, when colonizers came to what is called the Amazon, many of them died of starvation and didn't realize they were in the world's largest edible forest garden. There was food everywhere. Things were being tended in parts of the forest for food, for growing fruit, growing tubers, growing medicine, herbs, all of these things all at once. So I kind of cheated. So where is the world's largest edible forest garden? It is the Amazon. Who planted it? I didn't hear. It's kind of a trick question because first of all, no one did. Also, this is from a quote from the Atlantic magazine. Okay, this is not just like Michelle and Ramon in their crazy astrology permaculture niche worlds, okay? This is from the Atlantic, where there's a growing recognition from scientists where they're realizing that the Amazon is a cultural artifact. That it is not just, you know, it's this emblem of wilderness in the world, but actually Native people in the basin created the conditions for the Amazon. They didn't cultivate by planting every single tree in the Amazon. No, that's an impossibility, but they created the conditions for the Amazon to grow and thrive. And part of how they did that was through regenerative soil practices. This to me like changes everything. And when I found this out, it shifted everything in me and recalled in me deeply the humans can have a different role. I was raised mostly in the United States, where we are taught that, especially by the environmental movement, actually, where we're taught that humans are like a cancer or a virus and that our presence is unilaterally bad. And to see that we could actually help usher in like ecotopias
No.
is massive. It starts to question like, what
because
is our
we
role
need
as people? What's
not
our
to
role as
get
people on
rid
Earth?
of that. The
What's-
indigenous.
What's that? Someone chiming in, please do. Okay. What is our role as people on Earth? What is our role? We can't just go and imagine the future coming from a place where we think humans are bad for the Earth. I don't know what kind of future we imagine when we think that. What we want to do is help us all envision our role as, no, what we want to do is envision 500 years, knowing that humans have the capacity to work in tune, to rhyme with nature, to be an extension of nature, to be an extension of regeneration and health and healing and growth. This book, Tending the Wild, deserves a shout out here, and speaks to, it's really amazing, super humongous book. Please check it out, Tending the Wild. And in part of it, you know, they talk about how even this term wilderness for some Californian Native folks, that word is like a bad word. It means a place that's like untended and like has been like abandoned. Nobody cares about. So even like how we do conservation is so influenced by these cultural ways, and these cultural ways of seeing our role, right? Is conservation about preserving a plot of land where nature can do its thing and humans don't harm it and don't intervene at all? Well, for these guys, that's seen as abandonment. You're supposed to tend to and cultivate and give thanks and harvest and give back. I want to say more about that, but I think I'm running out of time. So a lot more to say about that. Bioremediation is possible. We can go. So we can, using some of those same principles that were used in the Amazon, we can solve for problems that even humans are creating. Looking to nature to say, how does nature do this? How does nature deal with waste? Oh my God, actually in nature, there's no such thing as waste. It's all a spherical metabolism, as David Abrams says. The yuck of someone else is the yum of someone else, right? When a deer pees in the woods do not freak out and say, what are we going to do with this? Someone in the woods is saying, oh my God, yum, this is great. This is what we needed. We need more of this. So I'm going to like smash through this, but I was taught that there are 3 types of bioremediation, which is basically fixing waste and pollution problems with nature. And the 3 images on the bottom are the work of one of my heroes, John Todd, who has been working on this since I was born. But the 3 types of remediation are microbial, phytoremediation, which is plants. You see both of those happening here, and mycoremediation. And microremediation is essentially with fungus, and what a lot of us call mushrooms. In talking about nuclear waste, I do want to say again, so it's like the regenerative power of humans working with the regenerative power of nature, and even the stuff that we think of as the most toxic. So there's some nuclear waste sites where they have sarcophagi, they call it, of waste, where they put nuclear waste inside of a metal container, inside of another metal container, inside of another metal container. There was leakage in those containers. They opened them up to go to fix them, and there were mushrooms, there was fungus growing in there. So even the stuff that we think of as the most toxic, there might be other creatures on Earth that are like, not only do I like this, but as I eat it, I transform it. Just like when we eat, we transform things. So boom, bioremediation, we can do it. We're going to do it. Work with us on it. Let's learn more together. Agua es vida, water is life, and oxygen is life. Okay, clean water is the first medicine. It is so simple. Like, again, we're not talking about just AI futures. AI is not the answer for everything. Okay, clean water might be, though. I do know that everybody needs clean water. Okay, clean air, oxygen. Oxygen and water is medicine. Oxygen that we breathe is medicine. And, one of the issues that we're going to have going into the future here, where we're carbonizing the atmosphere too much, is it actually dampens our intellectual abilities.
Mm.
And again, the types of futures we're trying to live into, we're trying to take a breath. We're trying to have them be embodied. And that might actually be one of the ways that we have to do things here, because our intellect is being dampened by all this carbon. And actually, let's think about clean versions of all of the elements. So we've got clean air, clean water, clean land, and even clean fire, which might mean new types of energy and the ways that we harvest and use energy. We're in Colorado. We actually have plenty of energy, but we haven't designed anything to harvest it. We designed everything to extract energy from somewhere else and bring it in. More on that later. This is just the overview. Oh, I am really behind on time. Okay. I also want to name, there's so much to learn from different people around the world. These are two leaders from Latin America, Enrique Peñalosa, who's one of my heroes, and Jamie Lerner from Brazil. Enrique is from Colombia. Both of them were mayors of their towns. Probably both pretty controversial figures. Enrique was hated, especially by the wealthier classes. But they radically transformed their communities, partly by, especially for Enrique, by asking, what does the community actually need? So I want to tell you, one of the revolutionary things that he did was he looked at the budget and he was like, wait a minute, when we build a new community on the outskirts of Bogota, the first thing we do is we build a road. We build that road, it's expensive, now we're out of money. No one in that community can even afford a freaking car. Okay, we can't afford to build playgrounds now. We can't afford to build schools. We used all the money on the road. What do people want? People started naming what they want: education, economic viability. So he started building pathways, like bike lanes, basically, to those communities. And then people could more easily afford bikes, could more easily afford roller skates. Okay, and then using the money for what people wanted: schools, playgrounds. Right? And also there's something there about not just saying, what do the people want and need, and prioritizing that, but also saying, we actually have what we need. Maybe we don't need $15 trillion to build the communities that we want. Maybe we just need to reprioritize what we have. Jamie Lerner radicalized the transportation system and basically made it, and his goal was, and he completed it, I want people to use public transportation, and I want it to cost equal or less than having a car. And I want it to take you where you're going in the same amount of time or less than having a car. Transform the transportation system, and cities across the world are trying to learn how Curitiba did it.
Can I say something there?
Yeah, please do.
One of the things too that, these two worked on is this kind of concept of urban acupuncture and of making tiny interventions at different points in a community, in a city. Sometimes they're aesthetic, sometimes they're ecological. I think the one on the right is Japan or Korea, excuse me. And this was a project to create more access to a waterway. And then on the left there is Rio de Janeiro, and just like bringing some color to the favelas, right? So just like tiny interventions in a community or in an urban or built environment that have a cumulative effect over time in like uplifting that environment and creating more access and creating more access to green space and so on. So
I'm here in the chat trying to talk to the person talking about 1492. Yes, this is part of the influence for this presentation. It was actually two books, and one is 1491 and one is 1493. So I think we meant 1493, so check that. Multiple forms of building. In fact, I'm just going to skip ahead. The first skyscrapers in the world were like 1,000 years ago in Yemen. Okay, they're still standing. Here is a community from the 1930s that was built in Yemen that is still standing. All of this is essentially probably what we would call cob architecture. It's a combination of soil, water, and straw. Okay, skyscrapers. That's where they come from, just so you know. Again, there's different ways to do things. You don't have to have, again, $13 trillion and a bunch of steel. There are other ways if you're rooted in place.
and these are often non-expert builders, just to say.
They're experts, they just don't have architect degrees.
You want to talk the cities movement just real quick, and then we'll.
Well, it's a cities movement, and then also just a locality thing. So we just wanted to name that, you know, we've had these COP negotiations, Conference of Parties negotiations for climate sanity that have been happening for the past like 29 years. And, you know, our country like decides to join in when they do and don't, and they agree to stuff and they go back on it, or they make an agreement and they're like, actually what we meant is different than what you thought we meant. And so there's this movement to say, well, because we can't only rely on federal government to do what is right, that local cities, local regions can make their own commitments and follow those, and that there's a power in working locally. And those cities are actually creating networks of cities that are working with each other to share best practices and saying, like, how is it working there? How does it work here? What does it mean for a city in Denmark to go carbon neutral versus a city in Brazil? Like, what are the differences, but also what are some of the things that worked in both places that might help us do it here in Colorado? So there's Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, there's US Sustainable Directors Network. I've worked a little bit with both, and regardless, it is a good model to remind us that we can have local power and local influence, even when we're frustrated by what's happening on a national and international level.
Just a quick touch on, just to spark the imagination. This is a community or urban development, climate justice oriented development project in Canada. And they're looking at alternative transportation. And one of the ideas that someone came up with is like zip line based transportation. So just to whet the imagination, right? This is the Uranus Jupiter square. We're supposed to be trying to think expansively and disruptively. Like, imagine just rolling around your city like Spider-Man. Okay, side note.
Wait, and can I say there was an art project for a minute in Canada that was like, not only is it going to be zip lines, but when you like harness in, it's in the shape of a pterodactyl, so that it looks like pterodactyls are flying all over the city.
Okay, I don't know why I can't
Just
figure
click on here.
this thing out. Okay.
Just click.
All right, so before we're gonna get into the meditative piece here in a second, but we want to just now, we kind of went through some legacies and just showed you different possibilities historically for how people have worked with their communities, worked with Earth, and sort of roles of humans in our environments very broadly. And now we're just going to just talk about some principles that we think are important when we're engaging community level planning, community level transformation in terms of just transition, in terms of climate justice. So quickly, one of our
This is my president, y'all.
yeah, this is the president, gang. Just so
This
you
is
know.
my president.
Yeah, it should be president of grannies.
I'm still gonna vote in November, but we all know this is
the president.
what's true.
So Vandana Shiva shared this concept of Earth democracy, and that we have to reorient our entire sort of governance and way of doing things that is in line with ecological reality, and the way in which ecological reality becomes the basis of economic reality, and economic reality is the basis for political decision making, and that political decision making is participatory, and that the people who are farming in this case are the people that are in the core of government decision making. So she just kind of lays out some of the principles. Y'all can go deep into her work if you're interested. But just to say, Earth economy is based on economic democracy and living democracy, okay? Active participating democracy, not just democracy on paper. The diversity of the natural world and the diversity of culture are the diversity of culture is an expression of the diversity of the natural world, okay? And so when we're looking at diversity, we're trying to cultivate and maximize diversity in both those regards. The balancing of rights and responsibilities. In Western legal frameworks, we talk a lot about what our rights are, what we're entitled to, but we don't look so much at what we are responsible for, what being a citizen or being an inhabitant of a certain place, like what that calls on you to do. So keep on moving. Okay, we try to have a picture in there, but I don't know why it's not showing the picture. Maybe yours isn't updated. Let's go back to the environmental justice ones. Environmental justice, if you're going to talk about climate justice, you can't really understand climate justice unless you understand environmental justice, okay? Climate justice is environmental justice writ large, okay? The environmental justice movement grew out of the civil rights movement in the late 70s and early 80s. And it was really looking at the ways in which in which racism expressed itself through environmental policy. So activists noticed that Black communities, that Indigenous communities, that Asian communities were more often, disproportionately often, the site of unwanted land uses, of toxic land uses, and basically everything. We're all making garbage, right? But they take all the garbage incinerators and they build them in Black communities. And so a number of studies were done across the nation, starting out in Texas, moving out across the nation, and then eventually moving internationally. And it was really observed that communities of color and poor communities are the communities that really face a disproportionate impact and a disproportionate citing of environmental harms. Y'all are catching some of our notes. This is a work in progress. I think we didn't update the newest stills, but whatever. And one of the things we want to look out for in the transition movement and the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy is that we are not trying to create a two-tiered system. Let me go back to that slide. We're not trying to create a two-tiered system. We're not trying to create a system where the wealthy have access to the green and the poor.
Two types of green.
Yeah, they're right. Where the poor are still dealing with the dirty energy economy. And there was a situation in LA in the late 80s, early 90s, where they built a new transit system, and it was basically just accessible to the wealthy. So this is what we don't want to do. We actually want to center the communities that are most impacted, that are disproportionately impacted by the dirty energy economy and the way it props up the colonial regimes. We want to have those communities in the center of decision making, okay? We want to look at environmental racism as a kind of structural violence, right? It's you create an environment to destroy people. I mean, and it's done over a long period of time, over a vast period of space, and it's so slow that it becomes imperceptible. And we want to start asking questions about, like, what does structural peace look like? what does structural well-being look like? Okay, so and this is all just to say that transition has to be based off of an enhancing justice. It has to be enhancing and based off of right relationship. It has to be healing wounds of the past, and has to be setting people up in the future to not repeat the inequitable patterns that exist today. And that transition without justice is it's not only incomplete, it's a continuation of what we're already doing, right? So it's not just a technological problem, it's a human relational problem that we're actually working on.
It's that, what do those guys, there's a saying, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. I don't know if that's really the kind of quote that we want to use, and pigs, a lot of people think they're so cute. So, but we're just saying, without doing it this way, you're basically painting it as though it's sustainable, but it's not. And I also just want to say, I feel like we understand that, like with Sarovodaya movement in Sri Lanka, we kind of understand that the people who were there and were impacted need to be a part of designing those solutions. But for some reason, when it comes to environmental justice, often our communities are completely left out of those conversations, and we're not seen as having any level of knowledge to even participate in those conversations. It makes no sense. So I want to put that in there too. Should I skip this?
I'm gonna say it.
Okay.
Another principle that we just want to touch on. This map comes from Buckminster Fuller, one of the people that helped create the geodesic dome. And basically, his view, we're talking, 1940s through 1980s. His view was that our problems were, that there was a huge element of like design. Like, how do we design for human optimization? How do we design our way out of the problems that we're having in terms of starvation, in terms of inequitable distribution of energy and pollution and what have you? And so he initiated this process he called the World Game, where he had groups of university students basically looking at challenges that existed all over the world and proposing different design models for how to move through or beyond those challenges, and how to design for sustainability and how to design for justice. And this is just a principle that we want to just fertilize all of our collective intelligence with, that like we as communities, community by community, we are in a design revolution challenge in our communities. And we are comparing notes between communities, right? And as we compare notes between communities, we start to see that the aggregate buildup of that is something that starts to give us a sense of what can happen on the entire planet. And we'll touch on that more in a bit. Okay. All right. How are we breathing? It's a lot. Okay. So we want to engage you all in a little bit of visioning practice. And we're going to ask that you, right on, Ryan, we're going to ask that you all have a paper and pen handy, okay? And we're going to do a little bit of time travel, Afrofuturist style, imaginal, Joan and Macy style time travel.
Also, this image is from Starhawk with the fifth sacred thing.
Right? Science fiction, right? From alternative cultural imaginations. Okay, so go ahead and if you have a pencil or something to write with, and find yourself in a comfortable place. And we're going to go 500 years into the future. We're going to go to the year 2524. Okay, so let's find our feet on the ground. Let's find an upright but relaxed posture, or even if you're laying on your bed, may even be better. Let's let our bellies be soft, our jaws and our throats soft. And you can close your eyes if you'd like. And a presentation on Friday, Renee Sills from Embodied Astrology really led us into a reflection on the blackness of space and the blackness of the womb and the blackness of soil. And this is the Electric Black Earth Festival, and we are recognizing that the black, the void, is the generative foundation that all possibility emerges from at every scale. So we can go into our own generative blackness just by closing our eyes, maybe turning our attention to our internal sensations, gurgling belly, smooth on the side of your cheek and tongue. And let's imagine moving through time, staying right in the place where we are. Sun up, sun down, sun up, sun down. And that goes so fast, it's like a strobe light. And we move through years, decades, and centuries to the year 2524. Noticing your breathing. And imagine this place, this particular spot on the earth. 500 years from now, what's in this place in 500 years that is currently in this place in 2024? So I'll give you an example. The Flatirons Mountains are here in 2024. And in 500 years, they will still be here. It may have a different name. It may have had a different name before. In 500 years, those mountains will be here long after we are gone. So in your place, I want you to imagine something that is there now that'll be there in 500 years. Now imagine that there are people that live in the place that you live in 500 years, and they're next to those mountains, that waterway, whatever that is, that'll be there, that'll endure for 500 years. Imagine those people. See if you can see them. See if you can look into their eyes. Or imagine the texture of their hands. Their clothes and how they walk. How they bring forth food and shelter themselves. How they treat one another. What would you wish for those people in 500 years? How, if you could leave them something, how would you want them to live in 500 years? And you can notice your feelings that you might be sending forward to them, or you can imagine that they're sending feelings back to us. They're sending messages back to us. And they're saying in 500 years, this is how we're going to live. It's a good life, thanks to what you all started or continued in your time. So if you're thinking in images, or if you're thinking in feelings, or maybe you're thinking in sharp concepts, however you're thinking, I'm going to invite you to slowly and somewhat halfway emerge from the black space. Open your eyes, maybe a soft gaze. And take up your pen or your keyboard. See if you can write one sentence about how those people in 500 years will live. Just try. There's no right way. Maybe some of the more visually inclined folks in the house, maybe there's a small picture you're drawing that accompanies your sentence. And this is just a taste, y'all. We wanna grow into doing these kinds of processes in richer ways as communities. Okay. So I'm gonna keep us walking. So hopefully everyone has something, even if it's just a couple of words, how we want the people to be living in 500 years in this place. Now we're going to kind of step backwards from that 500 years, and we're going to come to the year 2274, 250 years from now. What would the people in 2274 need to do, or how would they need to be in order for the people 500 years from now to live like you've imagined them living? What's one thing that people in 2022 or 2274 could do or be that would help make that 500 years a reality? You can just work with free association too, whatever comes into your mind. Okay, we are in the liquid space. It does not have to be super concrete. Just whatever comes to your mind. And we're gonna step backward. Now we are 100 years from the present date in the year 2124. What's one thing that the people in 2124 could do or be so that the people 500 years from now can live as you envisioned? And you might imagine again, their relationship to those mountains. The Flatirons will be here in 100 years. Those relationships, those bodies of water. Maybe even a relationship to a language in 100 years. What could the people in 100 years do to help the people in 500 years be or manifest what you pictured? Okay. Now we are 50 years in the future. We're stepping backward and forward at the same time. 50 years from now, what do the people need to be doing? What do they need to have decided? What needs to be in motion? Where do their hearts have to be? If it's Boulder, Colorado, if it's North Carolina, if it's Lagos, Nigeria, in 50 years, what do the people need to be doing so that people in 500 years can live like you envision? Okay. A lot of what we're doing is illustration. It's just illustration. So I'm going to keep stepping. Okay. It's just to help us root an idea. Hey, how about 10 years in 2034? 10 years, you can feel into 10 years right now. What do the people in your place need to be doing? What are the people next to you? You may be with some of these same people in 10 years. What do y'all need to be doing? What do Michelle and I need to be doing in 10 years? So that in 500 years, the people can live like we pictured them. How and who do we need to be in 10 years? Who could we partner with? What plans need to be set in motion? What ability to adapt to disruption? What information shared? What communities linked? What power built?
Policies.
What policies? What kind of leadership? Now we're 5 years, 2029, gang. It's right around the corner. That's just a few more gray hairs. 5 years, y'all. Free associate, whatever comes to your mind. Okay, you all. So we're gonna pause here. Okay, I know thoughts are streaming. We want to give y'all an opportunity to share those streaming thoughts with one another. Okay, walking back from 500 through centuries, through decades. Okay, so we're gonna put you in breakout rooms. We're going to put you in pairs. You'll be in breakout rooms for 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more because of the time. When y'all go into the rooms, please, please allow both partners to speak. Please be conscious of the time. Okay. 2.5 minutes tops for each partner. Okay. I do not know. I think we should just, let's see how many people.
I'm gonna make it so people can choose their own rooms.
Okay.
And that way, people who want to be in a room are in one. Please start with the lower numbers and find someone in a room. You're gonna have the chance to choose the room that you go in, just in case there's people that are driving or can't participate in the breakout for some reason. So.
Okay, y'all. Yeah. So we're gonna open all the rooms. Jump in one. Jump in one. We got a lot more people that came on the line. Jump in a room and just share. What did you see at 500? What did you see at 250? What did you see at 10? Okay. And we'll come back 5 to 6 minutes. Shit.
Okay.
That's all right. We'll just have to do that right when we get back.
See, is anybody here that wants to be in a room and is not? I can also assign you. Joanna, Sammy. Z, Alex.
Yeah. Folks having trouble.
Shay in the house.
All right.
Anybody let us know. Feel free to unmute or whatever. India, yes, I will try. It looks like we do need another room. Room 5. Okay. I'm gonna try to put you guys in room 5. Do you see India? Oh yeah. Wait, don't go there, India. Hold on, room 5. Okay. Ashe, I'm trying. She got in one, right? Joanna, are you happy outside of a room for now? Okay. Sherry, Lou, Alex, Jamila, Sammy, same thing. Also, feel free to just unmute here if you want to not deal with the tech, but you do want to say something.
I just don't know what's going on, but it's nice that I got here for the last however many minutes.
Yeah, we just did a visualization practice and we tried to imagine people living in the place that we live in 500 years. And we tried to imagine them living well. And then we tried to write down a little bit of that. And then we tried to walk ourselves back 250 years. And what do those people need to do in 250 years so that the people in 500 can live like you picture? Then we walk back to 100, 50, 25, 10, 5. And now we're in breakout rooms, sharing it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. I'll stay with it for now.
Where you calling from, friend?
I'm near Barcelona.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How'd you hear about this?
I'm actually, it's funny. I also just sent you an email. I've been really into embodied astrology, and I often like go to Renee's classes and listen to the podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Jonah's from or in Barcelona.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
I'm from Portugal though. I've been around.
Gosh, I have a friend in Spain right now.
Just traveling.
Yeah. And looking at Gaudi architecture.
So like in Barcelona right now.
can you refresh your page? So that because I
Yeah.
did some things that didn't get. Yeah, I can just refresh your page real quick. We're gonna.
Oh, why does it say confirm speaking your language? It's like listening to us. It says it sounds like you might have switched to a different language. Please update. Do you want to switch to Portuguese? No, don't say
Oh, that's me. It was asking me what
Oh,
language I speak. And I said, yes.
I'm like, this. Got it.
Here
I
you
was
go.
like,
Here's a future for you. Just a
Just
future.
mixing it up.
If you refresh
yeah, I'm trying to find it.
I was waiting for the link to work for a long time and then no one sent anything. And
Oh no.
earlier I went swimming because I live by the beach and I somehow forgot my swimsuit at the beach when I changed. And I had given up on getting it. I was feeling tired and then the link wasn't working. So I was like, I'm just gonna go see if it's there. And I
Yeah,
found it.
yeah, we've been having some weird issues with our Eventbrite, and for some
Mm.
reason there are a lot of people that get the links and there are a lot of people that don't, and we're not sure exactly why that's happening.
I got a link, but it was the wrong link.
Yeah.
So the link for this event, it said that it was for something happening tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Oh,
Yeah,
Brave-hearted.
that's very strange.
Yeah. But I got a link. I was in the astrology and herbs one on Friday, and that
Yeah,
worked fine.
Montague.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're gonna have to bring people back in a second. I'm gonna just ask them. I think we should end with the visual. Okay, I'll keep it rolling.
okay.
Okay,
Here's the thing. I don't know how to share it from here. Dang it.
you don't know how to share the visual.
Okay, wait. First, you're saying close the rooms.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna make it a minute.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And now I'll try to reshare my screen.
Oh, there we are.
Hey, folks are coming back. Okay. Not sure what's going on. Okay. All right. So we have very little time left. And we have 500 years. So this is what we're going to ask y'all to do if you'd be willing. I wonder if folks would put maybe one line or even one word from your 500 year, whatever you saw in 500 years, put one word in the chat. One word in the chat. Okay. Hey, Stephen, what up? All right. Okay. Yeah, one word in the chat.
We have community, braiding, love, right relationship, interconnection, reintegration, harmony, eco community, connectivity, balance, proceed without fear, liberation, inspiration, kinship. Oh my God. Ramona Michelle, yay, we're there.
Yeah, we got reincarnated.
Learning to
Okay.
listen and
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Wonder if we could hear, sadly, we can hear from one group, briefly from one group. Just what did y'all, what came up in your group? Um, Ryan, you ready? I don't know. I thought your screen lit up.
I'm gonna pass it on.
Okay. One group. Lux, Emerson. Lux, we are seeing you speak. We can't hear you though.
Oh, shoot.
Oh.
Are you connected to headphones somewhere? Mm.
I could share.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that was it was I use the word inspiring just to speak with and be with Susan for a bit to hear um how we can how diversity within community is just like such a large part of this process and of like this interconnected weaving that is happening and building accountability with this like imaginatory process and how it is like actualized in our selves and in relation to and with each other. Yeah, the imaginatory 500-year part for me was really powerful. It was really vivid. And then I felt like coming down from that, it really helped build these very tangible type of places to get to that spot. And it helped me connect so to that place 500 years from now in a way that actually felt like super empowering. Like these small shifts can generate this future. And so yeah, it was super powerful. Yeah.
Right on. Right on. Thank you, Emerson. Thank you, Emerson.
Mm.
All right, y'all. I know that was just a taste. We are out of time pretty much. I'm actually
That was powerful to hear a future that feels empowering. I gotta tell you, I feel like the visions I'm given a lot, empowering is not a word I would use to describe. So thank you.
and when I say we're out of time, I'm not closing it yet. I was actually going to basically say this. I actually want to push to 11:05
With the contrast.
with y'all's consent, and folks can do whatever they need to do, but we want to go to 11:05 and just try to actually fully close the loop. Okay. So I'm just gonna jump around for a little bit, and we're gonna just try to give you all a picture of like what we're like thinking on the, yeah, just as a close. So what if we were to engage in this kind of process as communities? When we're doing our climate justice and just transition planning, when we're looking at like, how do we actually enhance the well-being of all the members of our communities and center in the most marginalized community members? Okay. And also recognizing that we use these terms, most marginalized, yada, yada. We talked about language. We're really dealing from an assets-based framework. We're dealing from the idea, strengths-based, that the people, that the communities that are most impacted by these issues, that the first should be the last, basically, and that those communities are in leadership of these movements. And that's actually what's happening. Okay. So as we do our climate justice planning and movement and building and reshaping of our communities, what if we did these kind of processes? And let's say this is right here. Let's say this is Boulder. Let's say this is Denver. Let's say this is Fort Collins. Okay. Let's say Fort Collins's top issues. You all put what do you all want 500 years? Let's say 5 years. Fort Collins wanted affordable housing and renewable energy. Denver wanted worker-owned jobs, green jobs, and affordable housing. And Boulder wanted green space and affordable housing. Okay, so what if we were to start to communicate between 3 communities locally that wanted X, Y, and Z? Okay, common denominator, affordable housing. Then let's say we go on a national scale and we look at what communities in Colorado and communities in DC want. And just like y'all put in the chat, we want blah, blah, blah. Once again, at the national level, and I'm just doing this for our imagination, some people in DC said, we want land back and affordable housing. Okay. And then people in Colorado said, or California said, we want a youth center and affordable housing. So then we got like a national level. We start to see what are the commonalities that are happening nationally. Yeah, people are going to want diverse things, but they're probably going to want overlapping things too. And then what if we called up the people of the Sarovodaya movement, which, by the way, their university is called Nalanda. Okay. In Europa, we're supposed to be out here thinking about our 500-year vision at our 50th anniversary. So what if we called them Nalanda and we said, what do the people want in Sri Lanka? What do they want in Lagos, Nigeria? They want affordable housing. And then they have diverse interests, but everybody, right? You see what I'm saying? We can start to find, as we build from the ground up, community level, what are the commonalities that people all around the world want as they're redoing or creating their climate justice planning? And that starts to give us an idea, not from the top down. We're not projecting our utopia on somebody. We're saying from the bottom up, people build what are the diverse things, the specific location, specific needs of a community, and what are those shared needs that are coming that we can start to identify, and we go from the local to the national scale. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Here I'm gonna ask for actually y'all's imagination. I know out there, and our plan was to try to take what you all said and share it in one of these programs that sort of shows you commonalities, like a pad. What is it?
It's a Mentimeter.
Mentimeter.
It's ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. We might maybe squeeze that in. But I know that out there, everyone's talking about AI. I know that there are programs out there that can in real time look at all the different. So if Colorado's saying this, DC is saying that, and Sri Lanka and Lagos are saying this, in real time, there are programs that can show us this is what the people are working on. And then we can kind of get like those word clouds, right? Like if everybody says affordable housing in a word cloud, that's what's going to appear biggest. And then we can start to see everyone around the world is interested in that. And then these are like the next level, next 7 down. Okay. And I would, Alex, I'm looking at you. You know what I'm saying? I would like people out there that are tech intelligent like that. There's got to be programs out there that could show us in real time what people are working on. Okay. What people are interested in. What are the identified needs in a community? Okay. Again, we are stretching here. Okay, I'm just gonna keep walking. We're almost done. Just to touch on some examples, there's an organization, one of the oldest environmental justice organizations in the nation, called We Act, and they are operating dually out of New York and Washington, D.C. And they have engaged their communities in community level climate justice planning. Okay, and I'm just giving you a picture here. This is Northern Manhattan, okay, East Harlem. And if you look, you see they've got it divided into zones. NYC hurricane evacuation zones. They're looking for climate preparedness, and they're looking for those communities that are on the coast and are going to get hit hardest, heaviest, and probably have the least protection. And they're like, how do we design our communities for resilience in those spaces? Okay. If you look down here, they're talking about like, okay, where are the parks at? Where are the parks? How do we design more parks and green spaces? What are the publicly accessible waterfronts? Okay. Are we getting frozen? Okay. You know what I mean? They're looking at facilities. Where are education spots? Working their communities in long-term 3, 5, 10-year strategic level climate justice planning. Okay. We can do this on a community by community basis. People are already doing it. Okay. It's just a matter of how do we connect people around the country, around our region, around the country, eventually around the world. Okay. Yep. we're moving. Uh, mm, mm. That's all right. We're gonna keep on moving. All right, y'all. I just wanted to say too, we can sit around desks and we can do this planning, or we can actually engage in a lot of different ways of utilizing our intelligence, right? Stephen Lewis, who's on the line here, was sharing with us practices from the Dagara tradition, right? And really thinking about, from an Afrocentric or Afrofuturist framework, how do we step out of just the purely or a narrow kind of rationality and look at more expansive capacities when we're envisioning our communities in 500 years. We want to work with 500 to 5-year meditation processes like we work with. We want to work with movement. We want to work with divination. We want to work with art and imagination, as well as those kinds of maps you were just looking at from We Act, okay? In our community level planning. A couple of just keys there. I'm just going to have them there visually for y'all to look at. One of the most important ones, I think, the balance between self-reliance and interdependence. There's no community as an island. You're not going to produce all your needs. That's an illusion. But what can you produce locally? And what can you share and distribute? And what do you need to trade for? Okay.
This is the original Congress.
Okay. I don't know what's going on here with the tech. All right. And then here's just some other considerations to think about, y'all. Just a general question of what do we even mean when we say community? Not every community is a locally based community. We have a lot of immigrant communities. We have a lot of migratory communities. We have a lot of refugee communities, and we might be refugees in a few years. You know what I'm saying? So when we're engaging in community level climate justice planning, yes, we want to plan for our localities, but we also want to be thinking expansively and creatively about what constitutes a community and how do we start to plan in ways that may not be as land-based or location-based. How do we want to look at different structures of government? How do we deal with the relationality aspect actually of building community level planning? I mean, conflict. I'll just quickly say that, presence that, okay? I think we stuttered.
No, you have to have the arrow on the presentation. You have to click.
Okay. All right, y'all. And this is, I think, just our closer here is, okay, we're doing this right now, locally. We're doing this right now, locally. We are starting to convene community members to engage in climate justice planning and really trying to develop a people's plan for Boulder County. Okay. Boulder County claims that it's a leader in environmentalism around the nation, but it's still a baby in terms of justice. And so we're really trying to work with, from an environmental justice framework, from a climate justice framework, from a food justice framework, from an indigenous sovereignty framework, like how do we build and envision and articulate and demand really a people's plan for the city of Boulder. And that's like a starting point. And there are probably other people even in our community that are doing this stuff. So how do we start to cohere, work together? And then over time, how do we start to think about not just our 5-year plan, but our 5-year plan laterally in relation to other plans, and our 5-year plans in relation to a 500-year plan as we just start to envision. And we'll go to the last slide. What can we all do, y'all? Maybe you start a group in your community. Maybe you start thinking, maybe you're already involved in this process. Now start putting it on a 500-year timeline, right? Does your community have a just sustainability plan? Does it have a climate action plan? And then starting to think creatively about how we aggregate plans across communities, y'all. So You know, and we want to try to just fire this meme off. 5 to 500. Hashtag 5 to 500. If y'all are interested, you want to start blasting that out into the noosphere, out to the networks, whatever phrasing of that, but just this idea that we're not just thinking about 5 years, we're thinking about 500 years, y'all. And we're trying to build from a community bottom-up level and start to see what are the commonalities that people need all over the planet. How do we articulate them to each other, and how do we move forward towards that? So we are at time, we're over. Super appreciate everybody for coming out and dealing with the tech challenges. This presentation is being recorded, and we will find a way to make it available to all of y'all. It's just a teaser to try to like set an idea in place. And our hope is that we can work together, whether we are in physical space, shared physical space, or whether we are of one mind, wherever we're at, that we can start to work together to make these things real. Return to you, Michelle, for a closer.
Oh, really?
Anything you want to say to close us, and then we'll.
I'm here trying to keep up with the chat. Thank you all. Actually, can we unmute and hear some sounds?
Yeah.
Even if it's just
Unmute, y'all.
Thank
bye.
Love you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
We can do it out because it's in the robot.
Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Okay, we'll close it with a bow.
Okay.
We need
Oh,
more.
and we have a message also. What, Rinchen?
Michelle, Ramon, we need more of this.
This is only the beginning, you know it. This is just the start, y'all. Okay. All right, y'all. So just a moment. Just go back to that 500 years, y'all. The people are living beautifully. And we're their ancestors. We're the soil that they're going to grow out of. Let's take our bow to that future, to this present. All right, we'll see you at Venerable Panavatis. Come through.
Thanks.
Love, peace,
Bye.
intelligence.
Bless your visions.
All right, we got to head out instantly, instantaneously.
I didn't close it yet.
You didn't close it?
No.
Let's go. We gotta go. I'm putting my
Thank
paper
you.
in my mouth. We gotta go. We gotta go.